Welcome to Michael's Yapcast, where I, your host Michael, talk about a large range of hot topics. Today's topic is, how did BC First Nations traditional economies change after contact? What are the major impacts of colonialism on traditional economies? To answer this, we need to see how they were before contact and why this traditional economy was so crucial for the first peoples at the time. Then we will see the impact that colonialism had on the traditional economy of the first peoples in BC. So, notes out, mind open, Michael's Yapcast starts now. I'm Michael Heinrichs Batista. I would like to acknowledge that I'm speaking from the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territories of the Stalo Nation, specifically the Sumas and Matsqui First Nations. Where I'm speaking from, Abbotsford, BC, the major economic currency of the people was resources like food and animal furs. The Stalo used resources such as meat, skins, fish, and many others to create a trade economy with other communities. These resources were traded to gather materials that weren't common in their area. They were traded in important meeting places where a large group of First Nations gathered at certain times of the year to trade goods, exchange ideas, and build their social relationships. Trade partners were frequently made through marriage. This often meant that the two families united through marriage could share resources as well as being trading partners. This not only made resources valuable and appreciated, but it also created connections between different communities, consequently reinforcing the traditional economy. With that also came positions of power within communities. Before contact, everyone in the community had a job and a role. The Canadian Encyclopedia says that traditionally, Indigenous cultures had defined gender roles, with different responsibilities assigned to men and women. However, these roles were seen as complementary and equally important. From this text, I can conclude that First Peoples did not see each other as more or less than one another due to gender. What mattered was their contribution to the economy. Why was this trade economy necessary for the First Nations communities? Trade was necessary in the past because it was how people gathered resources which weren't readily available to them. By doing this, it allowed for the movement of people, goods, services, and ideas over hundreds of miles at a time. They could exchange their goods with other communities, and those communities could exchange theirs, creating a chain that reached farther and faster than any foot. This also created connections between people and their communities, securing trading partners not just for the current generation, but for the ones to come as well. So what changed after the settlers made contact? Well, at first peoples still had control over their land, and still controlled parts of the trade, such as the Great Fur Trade. However, as time went on, trade became purely transactional rather than communal. They were also taken advantage of and pushed off their own land. They no longer had any say in the economy and gained no profit from their resources. Alongside this, family roles underwent significant changes. As settlers came, they imposed the European, or as they call it, the proper way of living onto the First Nation communities. Concrete roles such as men working and hunting and women cleaning and caring became common. As mentioned, before settlers came, men and women in families were not seen as less than each other. What mattered was their contribution to the community. Moreover, children also suffered as they now had to be sent to residential schools. Since they were taken from their home, they lost contact with their traditional ways, changing the economy of the future. All around, these families were forced to live in a way that they had never lived. Gender roles became rigid and differed greatly from how they were before contact. Children were taken from their homes and were forced to learn the proper way of living instead of learning about their culture. All this created extreme changes to the traditional economy of the First Nations in BC. So after contact, everything got flipped upside down. Before, everyone had a say, everyone shared, and everyone had a significant role which reinforced the community and directly created a strong economy. Then, once the settlers came, Laws separated men and women, children were taken from their homes, they were pushed off their own land, and trading was completely stripped of its original meaning. The meaning which focused on connecting people together and sharing, rather than using one another and making profits off each other. People died, suffered, and culture sharing and community was taken advantage of. As a result, the traditional economy of the first peoples was broken due to enforced influence that colonialism had on First Nations. So, thank you for tuning in, thank you for listening, and see you next time on Michael's Yapcast.